I'm Gene Grant, back at the table with this week's Line Opinion panelists. Right now, the Santa Fe New Mexican is running a series on the long-term health concerns of people who were near the Trinity site when the first atomic bomb was tested in New Mexico 70 years ago. Now, residents and visitors in the area say they and their loved ones have suffered for years without recognition from the federal government. And Sophie, this isn't the first time we've heard calls for recognition and more research. We've got a little bit of research going now, certainly, but it took a long time to get there. But I have to say that, the Santa Fe New Mexican piece, it was such a heartbreaker. I mean, it was not like a random person here or there. We're talking almost entire families coming up with some form of cancer. It's just a terrible, terrible thing. My first question, what is it about institutions that, there's no answer to this, but just to cut it out there, that cannot just step back from itself and say, look, we screwed up here. We owe an apology, if not money. Why does it take so many years just for the government to say, we acknowledge what was clear to everybody else beyond us?
Let's face it, this is not limited to scientific issues, medical issues, et cetera. I mean, there are many communities in this country that have waited a very long time to hear we screwed up. I think that from a liability perspective, there's always concern that you're creating liability for yourself, but you're the government. You get to decide who sues you anyway.
Thank you.
And so, I think there can also be a hesitancy to acknowledge fault for something that you didn't know was going to be a problem.
Okay.
And science has progressed, thank goodness, quite a bit since the time of the testing. And so, I think it's going to take some remarkable sensitivity and thoughtfulness, unfortunately, to look at that situation and say, you know what, we didn't know then, or here's what we did know then. We failed you as a community, perhaps acknowledging that this was the best we had at the time. But it's still possible to go forward, acknowledge the harm that was done to the community. Well, first of all, study the harm that was done to the community, and that's been delayed way too long. Acknowledge that harm if it's there, and then seek to make things better. And we're in that first step right now.
Interesting. Senator, can you touch on that a little bit? What is it about institutions that, you had to toil in one for a long time too? It's hard to come to an agreement like that, isn't it? I'm just curious why that is. I mean, people are owed something here. We saw this happen out in the Grants area with uranium mining. It took years for the government to acknowledge that there was a problem out there. What's that all about? It's interesting.
Well, you have different interests, different viewpoints, and different constituents. And, gathering everybody together and developing consensus isn't easy. Actually, Congress has acted on this. So, there were 200 tests from 1945 to 1962, and the suits were dismissed by the courts. So the Congress in 1990 passed the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, and it did admit guilt. And it created payments for people who were working in the mines, for people that were in the near vicinity, and also for the downwinders. So I think the bigger question on this is, have the people who have been affected, have they filed claims? Have they been denied claims? And is there something to the current law that we can do to make a change?
What would you like to see happen personally? Are downwinders owed more in your view, or are they covered by that 1990 Act at this point?
Well, I wasn't privy to the debate and discussion that led to the bill that was passed by Congress in 1990, and they amended it in 2000. My guess is that there was, a boatload of testimony, and the people that were there, understand the facts to the best of their ability. But the downwinders are, I think they can file claims for up to $50,000. Those that worked near different vicinities, including the Trinity site, can claim $75,000, and then people that worked in the mines are able to claim $100,000. And there was guilt admitted on the part of the federal government. So. I think and my understanding is that the Four Corners area is the area where most of the claims have come in, and my understanding also is that New Mexicans have been able to obtain payments from the federal government in these areas. So I'm not exactly sure what the problem is with the people that Santa Fe New Mexican has been working with, but my guess is that there probably needs to be an amendment to the bill to factor them in.
Interesting. Laura, part of that story Senator mentions that just broke my heart was the idea of the part where the young women were camping and the fallout and the ash is falling like snow in the middle of summer, and nobody knows what this is, and they're picking it up and they're rubbing it on their faces and they're having fun with it because, oh, it just breaks your heart. It just, because later on, of course, all these medical problems started happening because of that kind of exposure. That's a difficulty to take the government side for a quick second. Someone camping way, way far away, you don't know where the wind's going, you don't know where this stuff's going to fall. How could you prepare for everything, even knowing what we knew back then? But was there something different in your view that could have been done back then? Even, I mean, how do you clear a 200 square mile area for a bomb test and try to do something secretly? It's a very difficult thing to try to do. I get their bit here.
I mean, I'm not sure that they could have done anything differently. I'm not sure that, as Sophie mentions, that sort of the science and the technology was advanced enough at that point to be able to recognize or fully accept what kind of potential impact there could be. I mean, I'm sure they took into consideration the impact as they knew it, in their understanding of things at that point. But it makes me think of sort of the fallout from when the Twin Towers came down in New York, and there was obviously a lot of not just human sort of waste, but there was also a lot of the building itself.
That's
and
right.
there was electronics and there was other things, and people were breathing some of this ash in, and there's already been a lot of people who have suffered different illnesses as a result. And I think that you basically look at what some of those impacts have occurred, and you go back and you compensate those people, and you acknowledge that there's been a wrong there.
How do those numbers hit that Senator Boitano laid out about the compensation? When you hear those numbers, is
I don't think
$75 grand
they're
enough? Is
no.
it okay?
No, not at all. I mean, first of all, $50,000 is not enough. If anybody who's had a medical,
That's
even
walking
a
in the door
routine
money,
medical
right.
surgery,
Sure.
is $50,000 is what it's going to cost. That doesn't even compensate for other medical situations or quality of life issues, especially when you're talking about multi-generational illnesses.
Right.
And anybody who has a friend, and I have a couple of friends from Tularosa who have cancer, and it's just something that has occurred over several generations. And I think one of the frustrations for the Downwinders is that they don't feel like there's been, even though there was liability admitted in that particular act, I think the focus of that act was on the Four Corners. The fact that they included, mining in that, and included, a different amount for miners, recognized that there was mining happening in the Four Corners, where, that's not sort of the issue for the Downwinders. And they feel like there hasn't been an acknowledgement. And I think that our members of Congress now, certainly Senator Udall, has been, working with them and trying to introduce legislation to address their concerns
That's right.
a little bit better.
That's
and
right.
whether it means an amendment to that particular act or a whole new act, I think it's time to consider that.
Right. Interesting, one of the quotes from one of the local Downwinders, what Senator Udall just mentioned, was one of the first people to even come down and talk to them officially. That blew my mind a little bit. I thought, well, gosh, certainly Mr. Bingaman, Mr. Domenici, and others must have been talking to these people, but I think you're right, the focus has been in the Four Corners area, and these folks have felt a little left out of the situation.
Yeah, and I don't blame them for feeling left
Sure.
out, because from what I gather from that 1990 act, a lot of that's centered on Nevada, and I think also the Hanford facility
good
up
point.
in Washington State.
That's right.
The people down in southern New Mexico really, I can't imagine that if this was a more populated state, that a lot of these things would have been addressed by now.
Right.
And the other thing too is, Laura mentioned the multi-generational aspect of this. There are many people in the Tularosa area and in the southern Mexico area that you would say, okay, this happened 70 years ago.
Right.
But many families have histories
That's
of
right.
cancer,
That's
of
right.
thyroid cancer. And thyroid cancer was also, I mean, it's anecdotal, but thyroid cancer was also found in a lot of the survivors from Chernobyl as well. So, so this doesn't just affect the people who are elderly now, who were alive at the time. It's also their families and their descendants.
Interesting. That's all the time we have for this week. Now, join us online at NewMexicoInFocus.org for our conversation about an interesting connection between New Mexico and the recent contact with Pluto. I'm Gene Grant. As always, we appreciate your time and effort to stay informed and engaged, and we'll see you next week in Focus. Get a preview of what's coming up on the next New Mexico in Focus. It's easy. Sign up for our weekly email at NewMexicoInFocus.org.